really good at this kind of stuff. He's a former Georgia quarterback, and obviously we're happy to have David Greene joining us. David, Happy New Year to you and your family.
Yes, sir, buddy. You too, Plaster. It's I about had a heart attack, I think, New Year's Eve. I don't know if I was going to make it all the way to the New Year's, but
I can understand that.
And you know what's crazy? I don't know if y'all saw the stuff going around on Twitter when the new year, kicked in literally as they were missing a field goal. You couldn't have dreamed that up any different. But what a moment. That was a scary game. I went back and watched it again. It's a lot more fun watching it the second time than it was living it the first.
Yeah. The first gave you nothing but a touch of gas. David, is a year ago when Georgia makes the run, that's really exciting and everybody's go dogs and all this kind of stuff. But when you're trying to repeat, does the fans' attitude change a little bit? Expectations and sort of a snotty, we should be there and this win wasn't good enough because it didn't do X, Y, Z.
Well, I think last year we had been there for so many years, just knocking on the door. And, we can certainly feel for those Ohio State fans because that was us for the last 4 or 5 years before that, where we would be beating Alabama the entire game. And then they would end up scoring the go-ahead, winning in the last 30 seconds of the game. So we certainly know what that's like. Getting over the hump with Alabama was massive because that was we needed to get over that hump specifically with them because of the way they've beaten us historically. To be able to get that monkey off our back, be able to get that national championship. Look, the expectations have been high in Athens forever. But coming into this year, you knew they were going to be high coming back with Stetson. And I think a lot of the Georgia fans and even a lot of the national folks are a little did not realize our defense would do as well as it had up till obviously this last game. It went a whole lot of defense there. But to lose 5 starters to the draft and still have the kind of success they did on that side of the ball is pretty remarkable. And the way that Georgia's won, I mean, Plaster, think of this. I mean, there's been games where they've turned the ball over 3 or 4 times and you felt like we played sloppy and we still won by 3 scores. And you're going, that's when you got a pretty good team is when you don't play extremely well, but you still find a way to beat a pretty good opponent.
As a Vandy fan, I don't know that feeling. But thank you for sharing it. So we got a picture up there of Stetson Bennett. And everybody's kind of tried to pigeonhole him into, well, he's a game manager and that's all he is. I'm not buying that. David, there is something about him, whether you just say, well, he's a winner, or there's something about him that's better than what he's been pigeonholed.
Oh, there's no doubt in my mind as well. I mean, with quarterbacks, it's kind of hard to measure them. It's easy to measure how the ball comes out of their hand and that kind of deal. And first of all, I don't think he gets enough credit for that. I mean, the kid could throw the ball extremely well. Listening to Kirby Smart, you can tell they love what he brings from an athletic standpoint with his legs. I mean, he could scramble around, make things work. But his toughness, I mean, look, let's face it. If this kid wasn't tough, he wouldn't be the starter right now because he was never supposed to be the guy. He knows it. Kirby said it. I mean, they've had 5 stars lined up there year after year. And this kid has just kept showing that, that he was the guy. And when he had his shot, he took advantage of it and never gave it back. And there's been times throughout his career, especially you saw the other night where, into that second quarter, midway through the third, he was not playing good football. You could tell that thing was slipping away. And when that kid has to play his best football, he does. And ultimately, I think quarterbacks get judged on how they play in crucial moments. And at this point in his career, he has passed with flying colors.
I'm going to go one more, and then we'll get you some intelligent questions with Watson. Okay, you ready? So Monday, when these two teams play, one of the things I've noticed is that Max Duggan, nobody ever is able to keep him in the pocket and just force him to stay there. That he's able to run, he's able to to make plays. Is this something Georgia is going to go back and look at and say, look, we got to keep him in the pocket because there are too many big plays he makes when he gets out of there?
Yeah, it reminds me a little bit. I'm trying to think if Bryce Young's a good example, but I know in years past, whenever you're playing a really athletic quarterback, Joe Burrow could be a great example as well, that they don't have to necessarily be like a Lamar Jackson runner, but they're good enough. Even CJ Stroud showed it last week. They're good enough to beat you with your legs if you let them get outside the pocket. Bad things happen. And I definitely think Georgia's going to try to contain him as much as they can because he's definitely one of those players that, you get him off script, it gets dangerous. Bad things happen. The kid's a heck of an athlete. You can tell just by watching him that the kid's hungry. He plays hard. He loves his brothers. I mean, this kid's all in. And one thing I can guarantee you about TCU, it doesn't matter what the score is in that game. These kids they're going to fight. They believe in who they are. You can tell they believe they've got an identity. And they're playing extremely good football right now. So got a lot of respect for them. I've only seen them play a little bit. I think a lot of people, when they see the name TCU, they just naturally think, oh, these guys aren't going to be that much. Well, certainly they showed Michigan what they're all about, and they absolutely got after the Wolverines.
Now to the better questions. Watson, say hello to David Greene.
David, thanks for coming on. Neat having you this week with the game at the end of the week. Being an old quarterback myself and coaching them for 40 plus years, I don't think people understand, and you will, when quarterbacks start poorly, a bunch of them don't end positively. They stay poorly.
Sure.
And it's just a whole lot of them do that.
Yeah.
Stetson has been one of those guys, and if he didn't prove it the other night, he started, I thought, very poorly. He looked nervous. I thought he left – his eyes left where he's looking too quickly, and he'd start jumping around and looking somewhere else. And we both know when that head starts doing that, you're in trouble. And yet he gets to the fourth quarter, and he's played, in my opinion, one of his probably poorest games of the whole year, and yet plays maybe his best game in the fourth quarter. And David, those three throws in a row, I don't think he's getting near the credit for, man. That throw to the tight end over the middle, that's a BB hole that ball went through.
Yeah,
the throw down the middle is a very hard throw to make when you're sliding one way and he lets that ball go. He's sliding slightly to his left, and he's got to hit that seam between that two deep, and that one's on the money, and I mean on the money. And then that corner route at the end, he had people all around him. David, I thought that was three fantastic throws. To tell me he's not a great thrower thrower can't make those plays. You can't make them. And so he won that football game at the end. And on a night where he just didn't have it early, he looked nervous to me, and he wanted to win so bad, I guess. But talk about that a little bit, because we have been quarterbacks and understand it is hard to turn it around when you go near three quarters and you're not playing great football.
It's very hard. Momentum is a very, very difficult thing to turn around in the middle of a football game. And if you've ever gone into a game, you weren't fully ready for what you were up against, you can't find it in a game. And as hard as you want to dig down deep, you got to show up ready to go, or else you're in trouble. The one thing that's interesting with Stetson, in my opinion, is it seems like throughout his career, and I've seen it this year, where throughout a game he can slide a long way, one way or the other. I felt like the start of this game, he really started out hot. I think he was 10 of 11.
Yeah, he did start.
But right there in the second quarter, when they started that 2-minute drive at the end of the second quarter, and he almost threw an interception, all the way through the third quarter. And you saw, I think, what I saw watching on TV in the third quarter, he made some throws and they put that camera up on him, and he kind of looked panicky, like this thing is slipping away here. And he could feel it, and he was pressing. But I think there's something said when your back's against the wall, you no longer have that worry feeling because it's like, dadgummit, it's just a willpower. And this kid at times almost feel like loses his concentration in the game, maybe for a series or two. He showed it in the SEC championship. He played phenomenal in the SEC championship, but there was a series where he catches a ball and he's just throwing a ball, not even a yard downfield, and he skips it at the guy's feet on the side. And we've seen the kind of throws he can make. And it's like every once in a while, it's just like a lapse in concentration, I feel like maybe with him. But buddy, when it's time to go and he's got to get it on his drive, he's going to make it happen. I actually had that confidence when he stepped into the huddle for that last drive, because you could see it in his eyes. He didn't have that panicky look he just had 30 minutes before that. Mm-hmm. He looks like it's go time. And he's hungry. He wants it. You can see the emotion after these games, how much it means to him. And he just figures out a way to do it. It's hard to measure, to put your finger on it, but he just kind of has that it factor.
Yeah. David, my concern for Georgia has been the last two games. They haven't rushed the passer near as consistent well. On certain plays, they rush it really well, but it seems like when they're rushing four, and I know the competition is picked up, but they don't seem to be rushing the passers well to me, and they've really struggled with pass defense. I mean, really struggled in the last 2 weeks. What do you see? Is it correctable? What do they need to do a little different in your eyes? If I have a question mark in the game to stop TCU, that's it right there, is stopping the pass of TCU with Duggan sliding around and making big plays, just like the LSU kid did and just like the kid for Ohio State did the other night.
Yeah, the interesting thing about Georgia's defense is right when you think you kind of got them figured out, they just slip out the side and do something totally different. A great example was last year going into the SEC championship game. I thought Georgia was 2 touchdowns better than Alabama last year. Defense had played phenomenal all year long. And then we get into the SEC championship, and Bryce Young essentially did exactly what C.J. Stroud just did. We looked winded. We got no pass pro, so we couldn't get to the quarterback. We couldn't guard anybody. After the SEC championship game last year, I felt like, well, we don't have a chance. I mean, there's no sense in watching the playoffs here. And then we go down a month later and play Michigan, and we look like a totally different team. And our defense in the final against Alabama looked totally different than they did when they played Bama just a month before that. So I have to believe, Kirby is going to use that poor performance on defense to his advantage. And I think with Georgia's defense, I've just realized that, you never really know what you're going to get. I mean, they're pretty good the majority of the time, but there's definitely days that we can't cover anybody. We've really struggled in man-to-man coverage. Ringo, although extremely talented guy, has really struggled here of late in man-to-man coverage. They've been targeting him. When we've dropped out and played zone, we haven't been able to get any pressure on the quarterback. And we've been playing some pretty good quarterbacks that can shred you. And so we've really struggled. Fortunately, we've had a good offense that could score 40-plus points a game as well to be able to win those. But hopefully TCU will not play as strong as Ohio State. And hopefully Georgia's defense is going to be better than it was last weekend.
David, I want to leave you with this, okay? This won't shock you that this comes out of my mouth.
Nothing does.
I don't know Scott Howard very well. He's a very good announcer, and he has done a really good job, replacing a legend in Larry Munson. Can you imagine Munson calling last Saturday night?
No. Look, Munson, even when I played, he would drive me nuts because I'm an optimistic guy. I really am. I mean, I'm a half glass full. If there's time on the clock, we can figure it out. And listen to Munson. Oh, here we go again. We hadn't won here in 20 years and all that kind of stuff. Munson.
His glass was totally empty.
It was totally empty. he would have. There's no telling what would have been coming out of his mouth. He wouldn't have given us a chance to come back and win that one.
David, as I've told you in his later years, he and my dad were very close. And he would call Dad, later in his life in his 70s, and nothing good was going on in life. They don't pay me enough. The job sucks. It was absolutely, I could hear it, Dad would be talking to him, but I could hear him, even though I wasn't on the phone. And his glass was always totally empty. And in his broadcasts, he's one of the few people who could get away with that, but yet was beloved. It's amazing.
It is wild. And I'll tell people, and I think sometimes when people would meet him for the first time, they thought he would be this jolly old man, and they would find out real quick he was not. And he didn't hide it either. I mean, he would come out from, calling a game, and everybody's so excited to meet him. And he was his own unique personality.
He could have been in the movie Grumpy Old Men.
That's probably the best example I could think of as well.
He'd be perfect. Hey, thank you for doing this as always.
Appreciate you guys. Well, thank
Happy
you.
New Year. Go
Happy
Dogs.
New Year. Go Dogs, babe. Thank you.